the record button.
I
You
got
got it, Mako? Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for our webinar today. We are very excited to talk to you about the Grayslake and Palatine migration. I have Mako here with me as well today. So if you have questions at any point during the presentation, feel free to pop them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself if you're comfortable to ask them out loud. Mieko is going to be monitoring the chat, and she'll be pausing me for questions at different points throughout the presentation. If you could avoid chatting me directly, I'd appreciate that. I have yet to master the skill of sharing my screen and looking at the chat in Zoom, but I'm a work in progress. Maybe I'll figure that one out by 2021. So let's review the agenda for today's session. We'll be reviewing the Go Live schedule for next week and the Labor Day weekend, and then we'll also be providing a demo of Polaris Remote Offline, which will be used to check out materials to patrons during the offline period. So again, as we're going through the presentation, feel free to unmute yourself to ask questions, or you can pop them into the chat, and Meiko will grab those and share them with the group. So let's jump right in and review the Go Live schedule. We good, Mieko? Okay. So we're a week away from the beginning of Go Live weekend, and I know that there has been a flurry of activity at all of our libraries as we begin to prepare for our big weekend. The excitement will begin next week when Grayslake becomes the first CCS library to move into offline. They will do so next Thursday, September 3rd at the start of the day. Palatine will follow them on Friday, September 4th, at which time they'll begin using remote offline as well. Now, during Thursday and Friday next week, all other CCS libraries will remain online. So again, Grayslake goes offline on Thursday, Palatine on Friday, and then all CCS libraries besides those two will remain online until Saturday. On Friday, September 4th, many exciting things will happen to prepare the rest of CCS to move offline on Saturday. At 7 a.m. Central on Friday, September 4th, Innovative will make a fresh copy of our production environment over to training. So this will allow the training database to be as up-to-date as possible for the offline period. For Palatine and Grayslake staff on this call, as a result of the copy from production over to training, your data will be wiped out from the training database. So unlike other CCS libraries, you will not be able to use Polaris to look up patron accounts or search for materials. If your corresponding TLC and Sierra databases will remain online and accessible, staff will be able to use those tools to look up patron accounts if needed. So just a heads up for Palatine and Grayslake staff, some of what I'm going to review over the next two slides might not be applicable to you. But if you have questions, just pop them in the chat and Mieko or I can answer them. So as with previous migrations, Training Leap, Training Client, and Training Power Pack will remain accessible to library staff throughout the offline weekend. So staff will be able to use Training Leap as a reference to look up patron accounts and search for materials. However, we do want to make sure that staff don't accidentally enter in transactions into training during the offline period. Because any transactions that happen during offline and training won't make it back over to production, so they will be lost. So to minimize that risk, on Friday, September 4th, what CCS will do is go into training and disable certain functions. So in Training Leap, over offline weekend, staff will not be able to check out materials, check in materials, or place holds in Training Leap or the client. So we'll do all of this preparation work on Friday, September 4th before everyone goes offline on Saturday. In addition to updating Training Leap, we will also be making some updates to Training Power Pack. As with previous migrations, we'll be redirecting our production Power Pack over to Training Power Pack during the offline period. So this will allow our patrons to retain the ability to search the catalog and still have access to their accounts, with the caveat that some of the features will not be available to them, such as placing holds, paying fines, and updating their account information. So during the day on Friday, we'll be going into Training Pack to take away those permissions for patrons. Now during that time, we will also customize the training interface to let patrons know that there's some work being done on the catalog. So here's a mock-up of what patrons will see during Go Live weekend. All of our unique production Power Packs will be redirected to a single Power Pack interface. So CCS will put up a header image that will indicate to our patrons that work's being done in the catalog. We'll also put up a banner at the top of the page that links out to catalog.ccslib.org, where patrons can find more information about the work that's being done for Palatine and Grayslake. Then we'll also add some custom content here on the landing page that specifically notes that we're adding 2 new libraries to the library catalog. So in addition to those customizations, we'll also add a banner to the holds page indicating to patrons that holds cannot be placed during this time. And we'll also have a message on the items out page that lets patrons know that returned items will not be checked in until a future date. Any questions in the chat, Mieko?
None so far.
Okay. So at 9:00 p.m. on Friday evening, things begin to happen. CCS will turn off the automated renewal line. That way patrons cannot call the renewal line to renew materials against training. At this time, Comprise will also disable payments in their SmartPay interfaces for all CCS libraries. So you do not have to contact Comprise individually. We've already taken care of that for you, so don't worry about that. We've also worked with Communico to modify library apps for those libraries who have requested us to do so. So Communico will be disabling certain app settings, such as account access and the ability to place holds. So we're still working with them to confirm some details. If you would like us to work with Communico on your behalf, if you have the Communico app, please email help@ccslib.org. That way we can add you to our list. At the end of the day on Friday, libraries should also remember to disable their sorters and their self-checks, or move them into offline mode, because at 9:30 p.m. we get the ball rolling. At that time, Innovative will redirect production SIP over to training SIP. So this will allow SIP-connected tools to continue to authenticate against Polaris while our production database is down. At 9:30 on Friday, Innovative will also redirect our production Power Pack over to the system level training pack. So once those 2 key pieces are done, Innovative will then pull down our production database and start working on the data load.
Deborah, I've got a question here. Will e-cards be accessible on Friday via the pack for libraries that utilize this feature? So Kim, are you talking about self-registration?
Yes, for self-registration.
Yes, so self-registration will still be up and running in library catalogs on Friday. On Friday, patrons and staff will access the catalog as they normally would. There is one caveat though, because Innovative is copying production to training at 7 a.m. on Friday, any changes that are made to production on Friday after that copy has been made will not have been copied over to training. So if you do have new self-registrations that happen on Friday during the day, those cards will not exist in the training database. So if a patron who registered on Friday tried to use, say, Overdrive on Saturday, their card wouldn't exist in the training database, so they might not be able to access that tool.
Thank you.
Okay. If you would like us to turn off self-registration on Friday, we'd be more than happy to do that for you. Just open a ticket. And we did get another question similar to that. Self-registration will not be available during offline weekend to patrons because we'll be directing all library catalogs over to training and the system level training Power Pack. We don't have self-registration enabled in that branch, so patrons will not see that option during the offline period. Okay, so at the start of the day, on Saturday, all CCS libraries will have moved into offline mode. Libraries will remain offline through Labor Day weekend until Tuesday, September 8th. I'll talk a little bit more about Tuesday in an upcoming slide, but all libraries, again, will remain offline through Tuesday, through the weekend. One of the questions we always get asked is, what can we do in offline? So the answer to that is relatively simple because there are only a few things that we can do while we're in offline mode. Staff can, of course, check out materials to patrons in Polaris Offline, and that would include holds that are waiting for them on the hold shelf. In addition, libraries can decide if they would like to register new patrons. If you do want to register new patrons, you need to set aside a single workstation that will be used for patron registration. No checkout transactions can happen on that workstation. If you haven't already, please email us the workstation that you'll be using for registration. You can just email help@ccslib.org. We're keeping track of all the libraries who will be offering patron registration. During offline, staff will also be able to search in LEAP and in PowerPack. And again, patrons will have access to training PowerPack as well. Database and SIP authentication will continue, but against training. And again, this is not for Palatine or Grayslake. This is only for our 26 other CCS libraries. So what is unavailable during offline? Everything else. So staff cannot check in materials, place or trap holds. Patrons and staff cannot pay fees. Patron records cannot be modified. Staff will not run the pick list or check in expired holds and delivery. Staff cannot create ILL or on-the-fly records. Technical services staff will not be able to add or edit items, bibs, and so on. And then API services will also be down throughout the offline weekend. So are you on your own during offline? Of course not. CCS will be available the entire offline period at all times of day to help staff as needed. So if you do have an urgent issue that needs to be resolved immediately, as always, we do ask that you would call the main CCS line. That way, the staff member who is working that day can pick up the call and work to address the problem right away. So we would typically define urgent issues as ones that prevent staff from doing their jobs. So for example, if you can't log into Polaris offline, that's urgent. If you can't check out materials to patrons, that's also urgent. So we do prefer that you call us directly when you encounter one of those issues so that we can help you get it fixed as soon as possible. For non-urgent issues, you can also just open a help desk ticket. So you can email help@ccslib.org to open that ticket. An example of a non-urgent question could be, how's the migration going? Or when are we going to come back up online on Tuesday? So non-urgent questions are things that don't immediately impact your ability to do your jobs and aren't preventing you from circulating materials to patrons. But when in doubt, please give us a call. I will be working on Saturday, so I always am anxious to hear from everyone on Saturday, see how everyone's going. So if you want to chat with someone, give me a call and we'll figure out what's going on if you have any issues. Oh, this slide is not nicely formatted and I apologize in advance. So what happens on Tuesday, September 8th? Tuesday, September 8th is a bit of a wildcard day. We have never added 2 libraries before, So Tuesday will kind of be a wait and see day. Palatine and Grayslake will remain offline through the entire day on Tuesday, September 8th. So they will not come back up online on Tuesday. However, there is a possibility that if the data load finishes early, that the rest of CCS can come back online on Tuesday. If we get the database back prior to 4:00 p.m., we will allow CCS libraries, again, except for Palatine and Grayslake, to come back online during the day on Tuesday. If CCS is able to come back online early, CCS will load the offline files on behalf of all the libraries, and Innovative will take away the SIP and PAC redirects. We'll be sharing updates on the data load via CCS News throughout the offline weekend. So if you're not already signed up for CCS News, please do so. You can sign up by sending us an email at help@ccslib.org, and we can bulk subscribe staff as well. We'd love to come back online early, but it's sort of a wait and see thing. We won't know until the data load begins and progresses a bit into the later stages. So Wednesday, September 9th is the official Go Live day. So CCS will make sure that all of the offline files have been loaded before libraries open for the day. At that time, we expect Grayslake, Palatine, and all CCS libraries to be live on Polaris at the start of the workday. All right, so when it comes to Go Live Day support, same as with offline weekend, for urgent issues, give us a call. For non-urgent issues, email the help desk so that we can get a ticket open for you. But when in doubt, just call us. That way we'll get a quicker reply to whatever issue it might be that you're facing. Any questions about the Go Live schedule? Okay, we're experts at Go Live weekends now.
Actually, wait, Deborah, I have one question.
Of course.
Can you remind me again what you just said about turning off the self-registration? When? We asked not to have any registration, but do we need to turn it off even earlier? Like you were saying on Friday, something about, I was not paying attention, I admit.
That's okay.
Doing something else. I was multitasking.
Well, 2020 is the year for multitasking. Don't worry about that. Kim asked a question about self-registration and PowerPack because there are a number of libraries that use that feature. So during the offline weekend, because all of the libraries training or all of your PowerPack interfaces will be redirected to the system level, there won't be any self-registration during offline weekend. However, on Friday, during the day, patrons can continue to register for a card in the PowerPack if that's a feature your library uses. However, just note that those new cards, when we switch authentication over to SIP, over to training, when we switch SIP authentication from production over to training, those new cards that were created on Friday, they will not exist in the training database because the copy is being made at 7 a.m. on Friday. So essentially, any changes that are made to the production database on Friday will not have been copied over to training. So if there were new patron cards created, they wouldn't be in the training database. So those new card holders couldn't authenticate via SIP while we're offline.
Okay. So would it make sense then for us to just turn it off on Friday?
If you want to, that's okay. I suppose it depends on how many you would get a day. I know that Evanston's volume is very high for their self-registration. I don't quite know what the numbers look like for other CCS libraries. So if it is a feature you would want to disable, just let us know. It's a pretty easy switch for us.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for
and the same would go. The same would apply to new card holders that register in the library on Friday as well, not just offline. So any new patron accounts that are created during the day on Friday won't exist in training, so they wouldn't be able to access materials through online services that authenticate via SIP. They could still come into the library and use their card to check out materials in offline because, of course, when we go back to production, they will have existed in the database, but they might not be able to access e-resources.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Deborah, there was just also a question in the chat about the auto-renew timeline. So we just want to confirm that yes, the auto-renew timeline will be adjusted this time as we did in the past so that no one's items miss an auto-renewal mark.
Yes, I know that's on Mieko's calendar to make that change this week. So we should have a seamless auto-renewal process despite being offline for a few days. That tackle all the questions?
Nothing else in the chat? I don't know if anyone else wants to unmute themselves and ask anything.
Okay. If not, you still have plenty of time to ask questions because we're not going anywhere just yet. So next, we'll provide an overview of Polaris Offline. I know we're all experts at this, but it has been a while since our last library joined CCS. So we'll do an overview of offline, and then we'll also provide a demonstration for you. So there are two types of offline for Polaris, remote offline and local offline. During this upcoming offline period, we will be using remote offline. With remote offline, staff connect to the Polaris network via the remote app and log into offline mode through the staff client. So this is the same type of offline we've used for the Indian Trails migration and the Morton Grove migration. So staff, I'm sure, are already really familiar with how this works. As checkouts are completed in remote offline, those transactions are stored in an offline file that is stored on the Polaris server. So when CCS and our libraries get access back to our database, CCS staff will load those offline files into the database so that library staff don't have to worry about that. While we're loading these offline transactions, we'll be keeping track of any errors or warnings that may have resulted from loading those offline files. We'll compile those for each library, and then we'll send them over to your CERC managers so that you can review them as needed. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing my screen for one moment. I'm going to share my desktop so that we can actually walk through the process of checking out materials in remote offline and how to register a new patron. Escape that. All right, Mieko, can you see my screen?
I can, yes.
Okay, so you can see here on my desktop, I have my shortcuts to the Polaris network installed here on my desktop. So for offline weekend, you will connect to the Polaris production environment. I'm going to go ahead and do that by double-clicking the icon on my desktop. Now you can see here my computer is trying to connect to the Polaris network, and it's asking me to enter in my credentials here. Now this is where I'm going to enter in my terminal server login and password. I have my own terminal server login and password, and your IT staff at your library should have a list of your terminal server logins and accounts. So if you aren't quite sure which login you should be using on offline weekend, you can open a help desk ticket and we can help walk you through that. So I'm going to go ahead and enter in mine. And now my computer will finish connecting to Polaris, which always takes a long time when other people are watching. So here I am connecting. Phew, we made it. And you'll see I get an alert here that I'm connected to the production server. Once I click OK, I'll be met with the Polaris logon screen. Now normally when you're logging into the client, you would input your username and password. However, during offline weekend, we're going to check the work offline box. You'll see that as soon as I check that box, the need for me to input my password disappears, and I'm just going to go ahead and enter in my Polaris username into the username field. Then I'll click OK. So I'm now logged in to Polaris in offline mode, and I know that I'm in offline because in the menu bar after my username, I see in brackets the word offline. That's telling me that I have successfully logged into Polaris in offline mode. So it always is good just to triple check that you did that correctly. You'll also know you're in offline because most of the functions are grayed out and disabled. So again, in offline, there's very little that staff can do. You can check out materials to patrons, and you can optionally create new patron accounts if your library decides you want to register new card holders. So first, let's walk through how to check out materials to patrons in offline. This is done under the circulation menu. When I click the circulation menu, I'll see that the first option is checkout. Now note, you'll also see that check-in is not grayed out. Staff are technically able to check in materials in Polaris Offline. However, we ask that you do not do this. If you check in materials in Polaris Offline, Polaris is unable to properly route materials or trap them for patron holds. So we do ask that you do not check in materials, even though it appears that this option is available to you. We've asked Polaris if it's possible to just disable this setting in offline, and the answer was no. So while it looks like you can check in, please do not click that option. So to check out materials, again, you'll just click checkout from the drop-down menu. This will bring up the offline checkout window. Now before you check any materials out to patrons, you'll likely want to enable checkout receipts to print. To do that, you'll open the Tools menu and click Options. Here you can see that if checkout receipt is not selected, you can go ahead and check the box to enable printing of checkout receipts. And then you can also make sure that the correct printer and driver are selected. Now I don't have a receipt printer installed on my computer, so I'm not in this example going to pick a printer or driver, but on your devices you would want to make sure that you were picking the correct printer to print to. Once you're done, you'll click OK, and then when you check out materials, receipts or checkout receipts should print for your patrons. Do we have a question in the chat, Miyako?
Yeah, just a question about if it's okay to practice checking out materials and creating card registrations in offline mode before the migration dates.
Hooray! Yes, we would love it if you would please practice checking out materials and creating new patron accounts. That's a great idea, and we do highly recommend that you do so in order to make sure that your connection is installed properly, that staff don't have issues logging in with their username, and that you can make sure that your printers are hooked up correctly. So if you need some help or are unsure how to do a test yourself, just open a help desk ticket and we can kind of give you the steps to follow. It's really very easy. You'll do the exact same thing that you're seeing me demo here. But please do test. We would love it. That will help. If you test ahead of time, it will really help minimize any potential issues that could come into play on that Saturday.
Before you go on, Deborah, another question just came in. If email receipts will work through offline. I don't believe they will.
No. So during offline, these transactions are not actually being entered into the database. They're really just being generated in a flat file that will be uploaded later. So no e-receipts will go out in offline mode.
And then if libraries are testing, do they need to let CCS know that they're testing offline?
You don't need to let us know. Go ahead. You can do a test on your own, but if you do want some help or any guidance or have questions, you can definitely open a help desk ticket. I know a couple libraries have already done some testing, so you don't need permission from CCS to do that, but if you do just want us to check to make sure the offline file was generated or created, you can go ahead and we can help with the uploading process. Any others, Miyako?
Not at this time.
Okay. Keep them coming though, guys. We love to answer your questions. So once you've enabled your checkout receipts, then you can begin checking out materials to your patrons. So it's relatively straightforward. in the patron barcode field, you'll type or scan in the patron's library card number. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to use one of my test cards. So with this particular test card, you'll note that a patron block popped up. So this block says, check the patron's phone number. Unfortunately, I can't check the patron's phone number in offline. So what I would do in this situation is click yes to continue with this operation. If I wanted to, for some reason, I could also click no to stop checking out materials to the patron. When I try to test, I'm going to pick a different test card. I have a lot of them. When I use this particular test card, you can see that here I have not only a check phone number block, but I also have a notification that says that this patron account has been submitted to a collection agency. Now with this particular card, I do not have the option to proceed with checking out materials to this patron. Collection agency blocks are the one hard block that you'll encounter in Polaris Offline. So I cannot proceed with checking out to this library card. I have to cancel, and I'm not able again to proceed. And that's because of this collection agency block on this account. You can see though, this test card of mine has no blocks, so I am not met with that pop-up, and I would assume that for most of your patrons this will be the case. Now you can see that when I entered in this library card that the patron's name and the patron's registered at branch did pop up. Now you may encounter a card holder that doesn't have a name or a registered at appear on your screen. Now when you see a patron's name and library card, that means that Polaris Offline is pulling that information from the offline files that exist on the terminal server. Again, for most existing cards at our CCS libraries, you'll see a name and a registered at pop up, but sometimes you won't. And that might be for a number of different reasons. Maybe the patron registered their card on Friday. They just don't exist in the offline files on the terminal server. For Grayslake and Palatine, most of your patrons will have a blank name and a blank registered at information because they're not yet in the CCS database. So it's totally okay if you encounter a patron who does not have a name or registered at library input.
Deborah, quick question. For patrons who have bills, will staff have the opportunity to click through and check out to them?
Yes. So one of the blocks that remote offline or local offline does not bring up is actually money owed. So patrons who owe over the first or second level fine threshold, you will not see those blocks pop up in offline. So you won't even have to click through them. They won't come up at all. And in the past, libraries have asked, well, should we check every patron in training to see if they owe money? And the answer is that's really a library by library decision. We don't necessarily recommend that staff do that. It's a lot of time, but it would be a library choice if that's what you wanted to do for offline weekend. But again, we don't recommend that. Is there another question in the chat, Mieko?
No other ones this time.
Okay, and we'll pull up a list of the blocks that do come up, and then again a list of the blocks that won't come up. We have those in our online training listed out.
There is one that just came through. Will a block pop up if a patron's code is for a digital e-resource use? Look.
I'm not 100% certain on that one, Mieko.
Yeah. So is this for like a self-registered patron, an online patron? If so, I want to check the list to be sure, but I do believe it will pop up if the patron has like an online registration block on their card. But if you're referring just for a certain patron code, no, you will not see a pop-up for a specific patron code.
Mm-hmm. And we can do some testing. I'm not quite sure which library is asking that question. We can do a test just to check for you. See, my chat's flashing. Is there another question?
It was Displays asking, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I'll
we
make
can
a
do
note.
some testing.
Yeah.
So, and again, we'll pull up the list of blocks that you'll see and those that you won't once we're done with this demo. That way we can look at them together. It's always good to refresh my memory on that list. So I think should I move ahead, Mieko? We feel good with the questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead and move ahead.
Okay, so once you've typed in the patron barcode, the next thing you'll do is scan the items that the patron would like to check out. So you'll either scan or type the item's barcode into the item barcode field. So I'm just going to type in a barcode. Once you type in the barcode and click enter, it will actually check the item out to the patron. Now, items in offline check out for the default loan period. Each library can individually set their default loan period. For most libraries, it is 21 days. If you would like to change your default loan period for offline, please open a help desk ticket as soon as possible. That way we can get those changes in and then give them a test to make sure they're working correctly. Once an item is checked out to a patron in offline, you cannot modify the due date until, again, we're back online the following week. So with this CCS test item, it's due September 17th. I am not able to change this due date while we're in offline. However, if you do want to provide an alternate due date for an item, maybe let's say you want to check out your mobile hotspots for 2 weeks instead of your default loan period. You do have the option to provide an alternate loan period before you check the item out. You can do that by clicking the special loan period button. When I click that button, the special loan work form pops up, and here I can check the new due date for this item from the calendar on the left, or I can use the options on the right-hand side to just type in a loan period value. When you provide a special loan period, an alternate loan period, you have a few options. You can either apply the special loan period to only the next item. You can apply it to all items for this single patron, or you can apply it to all checkouts that follow. If you check this last one, apply to all checkouts, that special loan period will apply to every subsequent patron that you check out materials to. So here you can see I selected a special loan period of 14 days. So now if I check out another item, I have a different due date of September 10th. Now, because I opted to choose the option that said apply this to all following patrons and items, this special loan period value will be applied to everything I check out after this until I click the reset button. When I click the reset button, that will set the loan period back to the default. Any questions on that? I believe during offline, most libraries opt to just check all materials out for the default period rather than try to manually choose different loan period values for staff. But again, that's up to each individual library how they want to proceed with that. Once you're done scanning all of the items for a single patron, you will place your cursor back into the item barcode field and you'll tap the enter key on your keyboard. At that point, it will prompt a checkout receipt to print for the patron and will complete the checkout transaction. Any questions on checking out materials? Okay. All right, well, let's then just walk through how you'd register a new patron account. To register a new patron, you would go to the Patron Services menu and click Patron Records. This would open the offline patron registration screen. Here, you would fill out all of the applicable information that you have. So we can type in the patron's barcode. I don't know how many patron test cards I have, so we'll do 10. You'll type in their last name and their first name, and then you'll make sure that the registered at branch and their patron code are correct. So if I was at Evanston registering a new patron, I would pick a registered at branch of Evanston, Maine, and then I'd make sure that I had the correct Evanston patron code selected. Next, you'll make sure the expiration date of the card is correct. And then next, you'll go ahead and you'll add in their address and contact information. To add an address to a patron's account in Offline, you'll click this Add button that you see under the address box. When I click that Add button, it's going to pull up an Add Address window, at which point I will type in the address of the patron. It's been so long since I've been to CCS. I think this is still our address. And then I'll click OK when I'm done inputting the address. And then I'll see it pop up here in the address box. Next, I'll go ahead and I will input their notice preferences. So for example, if they want to receive email notices, I'll make sure that I type in an email address. If they have a phone number, you can input that in the phone 1 field. If they would like to receive text messages, you would want to make sure that then you also input the carrier as well. When you've finished filling out their notice, their address, and their contact information, you'll then move over to the General tab. Now on the General tab, you can fill out some additional information, including their birth date, their correct ILL RB library code, and then their statistical class. And you can also input a password for them if you'd like, and any of the other fields that your library happens to use, like parent, guardian, driver's license, and so on. When you've finished entering in all of their information, you'll go ahead and you'll click Save. You'll get a pop-up indicating that the record has been saved. Now, you'll note that in this specific account, I didn't put in a birth date, or I hadn't put in a birth date. So Polaris will let you fill out the information in offline registration, even if so birth date's required in our production environment, but you can see it let me save this in offline without inputting a birth date. That's okay. The card will still load correctly over to production. However, if a required field is missing, the next time a staff member were to access the registration view of that patron account in production, they would be met, if trying to save, they would be asked to input that information before saving. So while you can save a record in offline registration without inputting all of the patron information, you will have to add that information in the next time you edit or update that patron's account in production. Any questions? Again, if you would like to register patrons in offline, you do need to let us know which workstation you'll be using. You can designate as many workstations as you need for patron registration. However, only patron registrations can happen on that specific workstation. So on your computers that you'll be registering new cards, you cannot perform any checkouts. When we come back online, CCS will load the offline files from the patron registration workstations that were given to us prior to the offline period. We want to load those first because we don't want to accidentally load checkout transactions that might error out if the patron cards aren't created first. So again, it's really important that if you're going to register new patrons, you identify a workstation that will be used only for registering new cards, and that you let us know what that workstation is.
Deborah, we just have a question about the any like empty or missing fields, if those will appear on an error report. I don't believe that information appears on an error report, but what we can do for the libraries who are opting to register patrons, we can also send the file for your registration computer, and that way if you want to like pull up and check the newly created accounts individually, you can.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion, Mieko. So we'd be happy to do that. It'll be pretty easy for us to grab the new cards that were created, and then you can review them just to make sure everything looks good. Okay, well, I think that's really all there is to registering new patrons and checking out. So there's one more thing I wanted to review with everyone when it comes to offline. We hammer this home every time, and I know you already know this, but we'll review it one more time. It's really important that staff are logging off of offline every 2 to 3 hours. So when staff log off of offline, that closes out the offline file that is being generated as you're checking out materials. If something were to happen and a file were to be corrupted and we're not able to load it, this has never happened before, so I do not think it will happen this time. But it's 2020, so we're just going to be extra sure this year. If that file were to be corrupted, we want to minimize the number of transactions that would be lost. So we do ask that staff would log off and log back in every 2 hours or so. Now to log off, it's very easy. You just click File, Log Off. Polaris will ask, do you want to continue? You'll click OK. Then you'll just log back in by clicking File, Log On. And then you'll follow the same process to log back in, log back in to offline. Again, that act of logging off is going to close out the offline file that you had been working in, and then it will start a new one the next time you log in. So it's just really important. We want to try to minimize any potential issues. We do ask that you log off and log back in regularly. Now at the end of the day, staff do want to make sure that they not only log off, but they completely exit as well. You'll exit out of Polaris and completely close out that connection to the terminal server. We've had it in previous migrations where staff haven't logged off at the end of the day, and then when we try to load the offline files, like the file hasn't been closed and we can't load those transactions until the staff member goes in and actually closes out completely of Polaris. So we do ask that, again, staff log off and log back in every 2 to 3 hours, and that at the end of the day you completely log off to close out that connection. Did I forget anything, Mieko?
I think you hit all the big stuff.
Okay, does anyone have any questions about offline? I know we don't use it very often, but it's pretty easy. It's not so scary, and we've all done it before, most of us. No questions? Okay, I do want to quickly pull up a tool for all of you, which is our online training for offline, which we put up last week. So as many of you know, we do have a new training website, which you can find at training.ccslub.org, and we've put up some offline training for staff just to provide a quick overview and refresher on how to use Polaris Offline. So when staff click Polaris Offline, it brings up the course, which is divided into a few sections. We have a video walking through staff, the differences between local and remote offline, how to log in and off, how to check out materials, how to register new patrons, and we have this handy little cheat sheet that talks about patron blocks during offline, which, based on our questions, we're going to look at together so that we know what blocks show up and which blocks don't. So during offline, the following blocks will appear to staff. We'll see free text blocks, library assigned blocks, which include things like registration has expired, address check required, see this note in a patron account, and so on. You'll also see system assigned blocks, including self-registration blocks. So I think that answers the displays question. You will see that patrons registered online, and you'll also see collection agency blocks pop up. You will not see the following blocks: long overdue, patron owes money, patron has exceeded the number of overdue items, they've exceeded maximum fine, and they have notes. So, any questions on that? We also, I would recommend you take a peek, and we'll probably link this in the newsletter tomorrow. We do have a link out to a PDF of our remote offline procedures. So if you want to print this out for staff to reference, or share the link out with staff who will be working that weekend, this will just walk staff through all of the things we just reviewed together. So it's a nice little cheat sheet to have handy if staff are worried about forgetting something on our first day of offline. Any questions? All are very excited, I'm sure. Okay, so I'm going to pull back up my PowerPoint. If you give me just one more moment. I feel like one day I will successfully move between screens gracefully in Zoom, but a future day. Okay, so I'm just going to pull up my last slide, which talks about preparing for offline. Miyako, can you just give me a thumbs up if you could see this? Okay. So here's sort of our little checklist of what you'll need to do to prepare. First is to decide if you want to register new patrons in offline. Many of you we've heard from already, so this one might be checked off your to-do list. If we haven't heard from you yet and you are going to be registering new patrons, please send us the workstation name of the computer that you'll be using. You can just email us at help@ccslib.org. Next, you'll want to make sure that the Polaris remote desktop connection is installed on all of your computers that you'll be using for offline circulation. You'll want to make sure you get that installed ahead of time, because if there are issues over offline weekend, we may not be able to help you resolve them. So a good time or a deadline would be next Thursday. So if you have issues, report them to CCS so that we can help you fix that as soon as possible. In addition to installing the remote desktop connection, make sure that you can actually connect and log in offline mode just to make sure your access is working properly. We'd also encourage staff to watch the offline training videos and just take a look at the offline training procedures and let us know if you have any questions. I highly suggest that you do practice checking out materials and registering new patrons in Polaris Offline. As we mentioned earlier, you don't need to let us know if you're going to do a test. However, we're more than happy to help walk you through it and just confirm that offline files are being generated on the terminal server. Lastly, we do suggest that you test printing your receipts in Polaris Offline just to make sure your printers are set up correctly and that they're working as you would expect them to. It's always easier to figure out all those quirks and kinks ahead of time than on the day that you need them to work. So this is kind of our checklist for prepping for offline. Does anyone have any questions about any of these tasks or anything else that we've reviewed in this session?
Can I add just one thing about practicing checking out? Mm-hmm. So if you are going to practice checking out in offline, unless you ask CCS to upload those files, you won't actually see the checkouts applied to whichever staff account, patron account, or test account that you're checking out to. So if you did want to go through that whole process start to finish and see the checkouts on the patron's account, open a help desk ticket with CCS and we can upload those files for you.
That's good clarification. Yes, someone actually does need to load the offline checkout files, so CCS is happy to help do that for you. Some of you may also know how to load them yourself, and you're more than welcome to do that too. But it'd be good practice for CCS, so we'd love to help. Yeah, go ahead.
But CCS will be uploading the offline files for this
Yes.
offline weekend. Okay.
Absolutely, yes. That's the reason why we use remote offline, because when you use remote offline, those offline files are stored on the terminal server, which means Mieko and I can access them, and then we can actually load them for you. It's one less thing we don't want you guys to have to worry about.
Let's see. Question. Are there any special steps necessary to place self-checks in offline, or is that as basic as disconnecting them from the server?
That's sort of a twofold question. Some self-checks and some libraries actually have an offline mode that can be used during these periods. I know, for example, that Algonquin typically puts their self-checks in offline mode. And when your self-check is in like your vendor's version of offline mode, it's not connected to the server until you move it out of offline mode, at which point all of the transactions that happened in offline mode are loaded up to the production environment. However, some libraries, either their self-checks don't support that functionality, or, rather be safe than sorry, you just turn them off. You can just unplug them or turn them off. Last year, I can't remember which library it was, but we did have a library put signs on their self-checkout saying, patrons don't use these. And of course the patrons used them. They didn't read the signs. So you might be best off if you don't have the ability to actually use an offline mode on the device, you might be better off just like shutting them down or powering them down. Are there any libraries here that are planning to use like some type of offline mode for their self-checks? I believe Algonquin has mentioned that, Highland Park. And if, again, you will be using your self-checks in offline mode, you need to put it in offline mode either at the end of the day on Friday or before you open on Saturday, because at 9:30 p.m. on Friday, we're switching SIP authentication to training. So if your self-checks or your AMHs stay on and something's checked out or checked in, those checkouts and check-ins will happen against training and they'll be lost in production. So hopefully I answered that question. Again, some self-checkouts have like a built-in offline mode that would like disconnect it from our environment, but still let patrons use it to check stuff out. And then it needs to be moved out of offline mode when we're back online, and the transactions then go over to the server. But then other libraries just simply turn it off or unplug it. If you will be using some sort of offline mode for your self-check, we highly recommend that you test before next weekend. It's a risky move to use that without having tested it first. You don't want to lose any transactions. Any other questions? No, crickets. Okay, well then, we can all sign off. We'll be sharing, again, additional information and reminders about the Go Live period in CCS News tomorrow. We'll link to the recording of this webinar, the PowerPoint, the offline training on our website, and we'll also include our link to our PDF documentation as well so that you can grab those and print them out. If you're not already signed up for CCS News, please sign up and sign up staff who will be working Go Live weekend, just so that, if something were to happen or be delayed, we'll be communicating that via CCS News. So encourage all your staff to sign up. We're happy to do that in bulk for you if you send us a list of emails. So if any other questions come up about offline, feel free to reach out. You can call us, or you can open a help desk ticket and we'll work with you on your questions. So thank you guys so much for coming. You're also welcome to stay on a little bit if you have more questions and want to talk one-on-one.
Thanks, Deborah and Mieko.
Thanks,
Thanks.
guys. We're really excited.
Good seeing everyone.
It's so
Right.
nice seeing everyone.